home and okay. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I was gonna say that too. I got back in town yesterday and my voice is going in and out a little bit, so please excuse me if it sounds like I'm low energy or not excited at any point. I'm very excited to be here with you all, and thank you, Dr. Wright, for the invitation to come and just talk to folks about, myself and my trajectory and the work that I do around reproductive health rights and justice overall. I'll just give a quick intro and try to connect some of the themes of the class back to my work. And then I probably won't take the whole time, of course. And if folks have questions, comments, or thoughts, I'm happy to answer them. So again, my name is Krystal Leaphart. Pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. And I grew up in a household led by my mother and grandmother. And I also have a younger brother. So if there are any older sisters in a Black household, especially that can connect, hallelujah, I'm keeping us all on the prayer list. Or honestly, older sisters in general, I'm sure have similar orientations to an extent in their families, but that's really important for me. I love the responsibility. I love being able to be in community and help family. But that shifted slightly when I moved to Washington, D.C. to attend school at Howard University. So I started college there, Lord, over 15 years ago and spent 10 years in Washington, D.C. total, including my time in college. And I've been here in the Baltimore area, especially downtown, for about 5 years now. So I spent the last 18 years of my life, including time in college, doing professional and personal work for the betterment of my communities. My formal activism started when I was 16 years old, and I joined the Detroit NAACP Youth Council. So that was a auxiliary organization under the Detroit branch. And if you know anything about civil rights organizations in Detroit, there's just a strong legacy of social justice and activism in that city and our branch, especially our branch being the biggest branch. So that's kind of my orientation to organizing and work overall. I continued that work at Howard University and also in the Washington, D.C. greater area, working with college chapters, but also began working in organizations like the YWCA or volunteering with organizations like the YWCA. So for further context, while I was in college, there was so much happening, just like similarly now. But when I was in college, that was the second election of President Barack Obama. So you can imagine the energy on campus and just the possibilities in one breath, but then in the same breath, that was during the execution of Troy Davis and also the murder of Trayvon Martin, which shook the country to its core. But one other thing that was happening during that time that really pushed me into my identity and work in Black feminism and Black feminist organizing is a friend of mine on campus who was more involved with gender justice work than I was at the time pointed out the difference between the women and the Black women and girls that were going through very similar situations like Trayvon Martin. So we had Rakia Boyd, and honestly, the list goes on and on. But there were so many examples of similarly placed situations that just did not garner the same kind of attention. And since then, I have been going on my own kind of path to figure out why that's the case. And one of those answers is just unfortunately patriarchy and the value put on our lives. And in that work that I grew up in, that I was complicit in to an extent in the civil rights context, we weren't focused as much on the Black women and girls and gender expansive folks in our communities and our work. So much of it centered on Black men, boys, which again, that's important work. But I just didn't, I began a growth into not seeing myself in the work. So I did, did more work and kind of lean more into gender justice work. This is when intersectionality, people started finding out about it, and it's changed and shifted in so many forms now. But, as we know it, that is a theory and a framework that centers just how different forms of oppression intersect to create continuous and deeper forms of oppression that centered how those oppressions especially affected Black women, femmes, and girls. So that was where I spent a lot of work working on things. And then also too, again, in context, this is Me Too going viral and all sorts of things are happening at the same time, kind of laid on top of each other. So I want to talk a little bit about and shifting in the gender justice intersectionality space, especially talking about Black maternal health and reproductive justice work. So there were two huge shifts in my life that really introduced me to the framework of reproductive justice and then the work of Black maternal health advocacy and organizing overall. So one of those shifts was a pretty straightforward shift in the sense of I was attending all these events and conferences and doing all this organizing around intersectionality and learning about Black feminist theories and the true definition of identity politics. And the same folks that were doing that work, that were doing the voting rights work, were also calling themselves reproductive justice advocates. And it really sent me on my own trajectory to figure out what that really meant for myself. And as I learned more about that work, I realized that, oh, this is what I've been missing in regards to like the civil rights work that I talked about before. This is really an important way to think about all of the issues that affect us in our communities, but in the framing of mother work and family and not having children, having bodily autonomy over your body, and really understanding how all of the systems at play affect how we just have to live our lives or have been forced to live our lives. But also, it's a framework that centers how we want to change and shift things and how our realities play out too. So it's not just about really getting to the root core of what's going on with us, but also reimagining what we want our proximity to ourselves and our bodies and each other to look like. And I'm like, that sounds right. So I'm a start, going on my own little journey to figure out what this looks like tangibly in my life. Especially because I'm a advocate, I'm a policy person. I love connecting people with stakeholders. So it's like, well, where's my lane, in this? But in that same breath and at that same time, I was getting my own diagnosis. So I have PCOS, which is also having a moment right now where I think people are figuring out more and more about, the diagnosis, what it looks like in our lives and how we might be able to just do more advocacy to get solutions and research for treatment and things of that nature. But in the meantime, it just shifted my own perspective in regards to I'm someone that, had access to resources. I'm involved in social justice advocacy work. I'm involved in repro, at least in the beginning phases of it and such. But I had not heard about PCOS and especially how it connects back to so many pre-existing, well, not pre-existing, it's a pre-existing thing to a lot of the pre-existing things in our communities. So it's like, okay, again, how is it that, we've come so far in so many of the things that we know and talk about and do activism around, but we're still not quite hitting the nail on the head in regards to how so many of these things land, especially in our communities for Black women, femmes, and girls. So that's been the bulk of the outside work that I've been doing in the last like 5 years or so. But professionally, my entry point into repro was with the National Birth Equity Collaborative that ended up being the Reproductive Health Institute work that we were doing. I was a part of the policy division and we were a part of the team. I wasn't working there at the time, but folks that were there beforehand were responsible for the Black Maternal Health Omnibus Act, which is the federal legislation that aims to address Black maternal health, maternal, physical, mental, all sorts of intersections of how Black maternal health disparities are created. So far, 3 out of the 13 bills have passed. I will name that the 3 bills that have passed are the 3 bills that don't explicitly list Black. So just something to keep in the back of your mind when you think about how things move on Capitol Hill. So that was really important work. What I really loved at that job too is we were vital to giving recommendations for what we would like to see in the second omnibus bills and the second packets as well. So expansive things like PCOS, menopause assistance, and all sorts of things that are often missed within our spaces around just women's health in general, especially at the disparities of being Black. And also, we produced the first of its kind reproductive justice day law conference at the Congressional Black Caucuses Conference, which happens every year in DC. That's another space where there's so many folks all over the country, really all over the world, that are coming to talk about the most vital issues in our communities. And there was just not a place for expansive conversations to talk about abortion access with Black maternal health, with PCOS, with endometriosis, with voting rights, and all of it kind of in a conglomerate of a way. Because we know that you can't care about abortion access and not care about Black maternal health, or you shouldn't anyway, because that's just not how things play out in real time and how we think about how issues affect each other. So unfortunately, that organization had to sunset. And since then, I've been working at the Guttmacher Institute, which is very different than a lot of the work that I've done, but they really focus on evidence-based research around abortion and contraception, and also track across the reproductive health rights and justice field to really understand what's happening as far as legislation across the world, really, and research across the world based on different issues that play out within the tracking. So we track trends, produce analysis to really make sure that the field has tools to understand the state of play, essentially. But actually, how me and Dr. Wright met was one of the exciting things that I've been able to do in kind of combining all the work that I've done over the last 14 years is really culmination of things, participating in the Maryland Black Perinatal Health and Reproductive Justice Summit. So that is being contained by the Bloom Collective based here in Baltimore, Maryland. But really, Tanae and others had this vision of bringing folks together from all over the state of Maryland, and even folks that are doing work in other states to kind of get a working agenda together so that when we have, Hill events or when we have events that are happening in the Maryland State Legislature, that the perspectives of various folks that are in our ecosystem, like doulas, advocates, medical professionals, and such, really have a voice in what we're asking for in regards to how we fix things here in the state of Maryland specifically. And there are so many other states that are doing similar models. Nebraska had an RJ summit that I was able to participate in. I believe they're thinking of doing something similar in Alabama, in addition to the work that's happening with the Mothers of Gynecology conference that happens. And so many others are doing similar things. So I am close to wrapping, but I could not talk about all of this work that I'm doing without talking about my family as well. I did not realize until much later how important my family and my upbringing was to this work. And I think if I can leave folks with anything, it's really using your experiences, whether positive or negative or in between, to really inform how you want to engage with work. And because part of this is, as much as the work seems like it's something outside of you, or I'm focused on Capitol Hill, or I'm focused on policy, I'm also being transformed in the work too. And my proximity to the issues that I focus on are so deeply personal to me. So yes, it's the disparities. Yes, it's the information. Yes, it's all of the things that you hear about and see and the things that you're reading about. But the reality is, this is a lot of ours real life. This is not just some hyperbole thing that we're reading about, or like I saw a tweet and blase blase. Like, these are very much so a lot of our lived realities. And even if it's not, I can guarantee you there's somebody in your community that's impacted by preeclampsia, or they live in a state with an abortion ban and they needed access to care, and hopefully, have what they need to not go sepsis and things like that. So anywho, let me stick to my script and then I can wrap. But again, I mentioned earlier that I grew up in a house led by matriarchs. But again, they were my first examples of Black feminism and organizing. They taught me how to live a values-driven life. They taught me how to advocate for myself. They taught me how to make something happen, even when you don't know how you're going to make it happen. And probably most importantly, they are still learning and still teaching me that it's never too late to grow and change, and really shape shift and be of support to your community. My grandmother taught me that she really just was an example of true leadership. She's also the oldest sibling, of her first siblings, and took care of so many things in such a firm and yet gentle way at the same time. And it was also top tier to see how she kind of exemplified that mother work framework and mothering my mother as well. So 10 out of 10 would recommend. Very healthy connections with women and families and such. I was blessed to be one of those that had that, even with, struggles and concerns. Um, and what I really enjoyed most about some of the teachings and learnings from my mother is her radical imagination for her children. So it recently dawned on me, honestly, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I hadn't thought about it like this before, but me and my cousins and my brother, our line within our generation, we're the first to get our high school diplomas. And as far so often, again, I went to Howard, so that's just a very different we have such a spectrum of experiences at Howard, and most people, that had attended that school, well, a lot of folks, I should say, these are like Jack and Jill folks, no shade to Jack and Jill, but like Jack and Jill folks that kind of have that legacy kind of work in their families. And I have legacy work as well. It's just different. But I had not realized until recently, like, oh shoot, like some people are first to college to go to their family. Like my mom didn't even finish high school, part of, for a lot of different reasons. But she still had it in her that it was so important to instill education for me and my brother, and my grandmother too, with her support. But I just think that's so important in thinking about um, looking forward and what you want to leave. Like, what do you want to be? What do you want your legacy to be in this kind of work? But also connecting, that family work and that community work back to these theories and the things that we're working on. Again, Black feminism is a verb. Like these things are verbs. They're not just sitting, they're not just dormant, they're not just something that, we can put in our bios, which I mean, it's in my bio. So again, no shade, but like it has to be exemplified. So how do we make the connections between the theories that we're learning and how we want to show up in our professional lives and really have it settled and manifested in the ways that we go about doing everything that we're doing. So that was really foundational to my work. I'm going to also see myself, what I like to call mothering in reverse. I don't have any children, but I certainly am at that point where my grandmother is, she's 75 now. People say young grandma, but my grandmother's 75 now, and I find myself having to reel her in a little bit and be a little bit more helpful in regards to some of the ways that she was helpful to me growing up. And I'm not quite there with my mother yet, but I've already told her you need to not be hard headed and let me help you when it's time to help. Um, but in that same breath, my next challenge to myself, outside of, work, and professional things that I want to do, the reality is sometimes we put a lot of that work into, advocacy or our family members. My challenge is going to be mothering myself. I'm my first community as well too. So how do I really take care of myself as I'm trying to take care of other people as well too? So I'll wrap there, but I will leave kind of like three questions that I tend to ask myself when I'm, engaging work and I'm thinking about how I want to participate in new things, especially when I have limited time. So how can I use these frameworks that, we're learning and using and apply them into my everyday life or in the work? Um, how can I vet things that I'm taking on or taking in for myself through these frameworks? Is it healthy? Is it helpful? Is it an equity, framework? Is it justice mindset? Is it, following some of the, the frameworks that we have? What kind of elder or ancestor do I want to be for the next generations and the future generations too? How are we giving back in a way that feels proper, that feels principled, that feels actually, just worthy of passing on to other people? Because unfortunately, there's so many folks that are in positions that have influence. And I think sometimes there's just a disconnect between how folks are showing up, visibly, and then how they're showing up in their personal life. And this is not something that I think we can just opt into when we feel, but I think it really has to be a larger shift so that we can show it the best way that we can for communities. Again, I take this work very seriously, but I'm not always serious. So how do you center joy in your work and your organizing and your liberation work too? And again, how do you bring others along in a way that feels authentic and good for, your soul overall? And again, if you're like me, sometimes you take on too much, and that's okay because we're all learning and unpacking our superwoman complexes and such, hopefully. But if you're not, this is the perfect time to do it. I wish I would have started thinking about some of that in college and how do we sustain ourselves too. Far too often, there are just people that are so sick that try to do this work. And I want to make sure that the people that are learning and growing in the work also get a chance to grow and grow old too. So hopefully you were able to take something out of my, I think 21 minutes maybe of remarks. Happy to answer any questions or just hear any thoughts from you all too. Especially I know we're wrapping up the semester. So if there are just any things that you all, have for me or want to share with me in my journey as well. But thanks again so much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to any comments.
Krystal, girl. You got me on a roller coaster of emotions. And before so let me tell you how this happened. I sent you I saw your message and I said, oh, well, you can come talk to my students, but I didn't go back and see your message until I responded. And you know, that was a couple of days later because I don't always get to be on social media because I got 11 kids. So, but in the meantime, I had told them, okay, guys, I'm not going to have any more speakers. This will be your writing time. I know you're working on your big final project. But then I was like, you know, then you and I talked, and I was like, oh, they got to hear from Krystal though. So, so I told them you were coming, and I'm thinking, for me, this is like the perfect wrap up for the speakers that they have heard. Like what you're saying is exactly where they're headed with their final projects. I cannot thank you enough for coming in and everything that you have said. I'm like overwhelmed with responses and I'm connecting with you in so many different ways. But I do want to give the students a chance if they have any questions. I can see they've taken lots of notes and things of that. So what are you, where are we going next? Who's got something? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Isha. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. I kind of was wondering, on the topic you were talking about at the start of your like presentation, like how when we're talking about like PCOS and not having enough of a diagnosis or awareness of these sort of syndromes, how do you think like because I feel like pain isn't really perceived well for like women and especially women of color and like the healthcare sphere. So like on a healthcare perspective, what can we do or in healthcare advocacy, what can we do to, I guess, better that situation?
That's a tricky one because I feel like it's so funny, very random. There was a documentary or a docu-series or something about Tony Braxton, and the first thing in the movie, it started off saying that pain is information, and it didn't land quite, in a way that, made sense back then. Again, this was years ago. I think I probably was still in high school, maybe college or something like that. But since then, I've really been using that as an advocacy framework for myself too, where pain is not normal. I know that, it's so normalized, but that doesn't mean that it's normal. So I think that starting with that kind of like framing around how we think about pain in general is just the first thing I would say. I think too, I don't know, I think there have been slight improvements in screenings and such around reproductive concerns in general. Again, I can't speak for everyone, but I know that here in Maryland, that's when I was diagnosed, and I think the screening has gotten somewhat better. But I would just say that I think it's just it's simple, but it's kind of complicated in application. But people just need to take people's concerns seriously. I think that's the only thing that I could really say. Um, I think that for us as like individuals as well, like I think our personal framing around pain, especially around menstrual pain, also needs to be shifted because my mother and grandmother, for example, I left this parts out because I just, I'm still getting used to talking about cycles in public, which is always a funny thing around stigma and such. But my grandmother had a partial hysterectomy due to huge fibroids. Her pain was so terrible that she couldn't leave the house for 3 or 4 days at a time during her cycles. And that was for the bulk of her, I think it was like 20s and 30s until they figured out what was actually happening. And then well, my mother's on the other side of the spectrum, but she does have a cyst on her ovaries and had preeclampsia with me and was, high risk pregnancy and all those things. I think we're just kind of so lackadaisical about some of this that it's like once I came around having a period and I had pain, and it was to the point where I was, hunched over and things. It was like, oh, just give it a few days, it'll be fine. Like it'll be good. So I think I think our own understanding of pain has to change. And especially having a mom where, no shade people that don't have cramps, but I'm like, so you just don't get it. Like you just don't understand. How dare you not have cramps? Turns out I think she might have PCOS too, because even though the one end of the spectrum is the serious pain, because it's like the lining is building up and when you finally have a period it's shedding like all in all, she hardly had periods. So that's also the other spectrum of it too. So anywho, hopefully that answered the question. I don't think there's a straightforward answer. I honestly just think that if we have a framework of pain as information, even if it's coming and going, even if it's consistent, it's telling you something because it's not supposed to be there in that way. Even if it's chronic, like if it's a chronic pain, there's something going on there that's causing it. So that's what I would say.
Thank you for that. Who's next?
I have a question. Thank you so much for speaking with us about not only your personal life, also your career trajectory. And I had a question related to your work with the National Birth Equity collective or sorry collaborative. And I guess my question was with the Omnibus Act. Because you mentioned how only 3 out of the 13 bills have passed so far, and 43 that passed, they didn't mention the word black explicitly in the wording. So I guess as someone who works in policy, but wants to specifically highlight black maternal child health, how do you navigate the politics of Capitol Hill, where you're trying to get people to acknowledge or think more about black moms and black working people?
So that's a tricky one sometimes because I am very outwardly Black in my advocacy and policy work, and some people don't tend to try to take that approach because they know that things may not pass or things may not move as quickly or it may not just be well supported overall. The reality is not mentioning race or not mentioning gender or sexuality, all those things in policy is the reason why we're here in the first place. Policies were intentional in setting us up for failure, so they also have to be intentional in doing as much as they can to help us with the things that we're trying to do. So I typically take a perspective where I'm not interested in kind of watering things down by way of not mentioning race or not mentioning certain things, even if it's something that is that people might call a symbol or might call something that'll never happen. Because people thought a lot of things would never happen, and they do. There are states that are executing on Black maternal health omnibuses and similar versions for state level things that are working in states where people thought it would never work. But the reality is, when you have the data coupled with the advocacy and the storytelling, there's only so long that people can go without, just denying what's really happening within our communities. So it may not be able to move as quickly on a federal level, but even in that work, policy at its best to me should be an avenue for advocacy and engaging with community members too. So now you have, Representative Alma Adams and Representative Lauren Underwood are the sponsors for the Momnibus. Again, they're going all over the country and having summits and such to just connect the dots with people in regards to what's happening in our country and in the states in general, and how policy can be an avenue to shift those things. So we'll see what happens with the other 10. Again, the three that have passed were, I think, COVID related, like climate related, and then something I think around data for moms. So again, it's getting there, it's chipping away, but I think that those things overall take a lot of partnerships and a lot of back and forth, across the aisle, as people like to say. But the reality is, anything, and it's not just for Black maternal health, anything right now that feels divisive, talking about race, talking about all of the things, are just not going anywhere because we just have a very unproductive Congress in general, an unproductive process, let's be honest. But I do think that there is some work that can happen across the states, even if the federal government can get themselves together. So I think you stick to your guns, you keep it on what it's supposed to be focused on, because what we don't need is to change laws for the sake, or change proposed policy for the sake of things passing. And we put all this money and appropriations and get the money into the states, and it's not doing anything because you weren't specific in your engagement and your outreach. And I think through policies too, even if it's not policies on a state level, there are programs. Again, I know there's a program. I think we may have had one here in Maryland, or a thought pilot around it, but direct money and direct, stipends to mothers that need it and stuff like that. So those things are popping up, and these are things that are not necessarily triggered or started from the Momnibus, but even the attention alone is important in regards to having the language and what the calls to actions are. So even though the policy is not passed, to wrap it up, sorry, I'm a little bit long-winded sometimes, but even in policies that may not move in the way that policy moves, there's still so many other tentacles that can be happening at the same time with the policy too. But yeah, my major thing is, it needs to say Black. It just needs to say it to be effective. But we'll see, if they go anywhere, you never know.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking, because I'm telling y'all, it comes up so much, and it's like, It's just not worth the trade-off. It's just not.
Hi, my name is Cynthia. Thank you so much for coming, talking to us about your professional and your personal journey. In this class, we've been talking a lot about like, what it means to reimagine joy and what it means to prioritize like our mother's gardens and whether that may be spiritual or artistic. So I really liked hearing what you're saying about wanting to focus more on Black women and Black girls who are dying through the system or because of the system. So I wanted to ask, and it kind of leads off from Michelle's question, but like how would you say that we can reimagine reproductive health advocacy in the midst of patriarchal, already the midst of patriarchy that like permeates through policy and yeah.
I'm sorry, it went out at the end a little bit. It says, how can we reimagine joy in the midst of like patriarchal culture?
How can we reimagine reproductive health advocacy through like,
You know, I think part of it is reimagining, but honestly, I think we have some models to lean on too. So I think some of it is like connecting the dots with models and work that we kind of already know. So again, you all have been, I was a nerd and I read up on what y'all did in the class. So like y'all have done so much of the reading and connecting already. I think it's tapping in again to the models that we already have and that we've seen. But also, I think it's going to take, it depends on the scale, right? Like I think there's a massive like societal scale like conversation that has to happen, but I think to shift in that way is going to take different amount of time. I think that it's going to take things like this where you're in class or with your community and just kind of thinking through like what would you have wanted in your own education in regards to your reproductive health, access to rights, and if those that know about the framework, like how does this actually look in your life? Like, what would you have wanted differently to happen? I know it's something that I think about often. And when I'm sharing, with folks, like, what would you have wanted? Not even just your conversation around your period to be, but like in general, right? Like, I think of reproductive justice and health and rights, especially too, as like this full combination of like the life experience. So like, what would have helped while I was even in my grandmother's, because your mom is born, they're born with all the eggs that they have. So like, what would she have needed or wanted? Like, what would my mother have needed and wanted? And then coming to me, what would I have needed and wanted in my own learning? And also just what do I need now and what would I need for my future self too? Like again, I think with the framework being so expansive, it forces you to think about the full spectrum. So what do I even want my ballot to look like in regards to my reproductive future or my reproductive health and such? Like, is that, a different like process of vetting candidates? They can't just be pro-choice, but they really have to think deeply about what I needed and how they connect with that work. And the lovely thing about, us is we're so powerful when it comes to voting in our voting blocks in general. You don't get a VP Harris just because somebody wanted to appoint a Black woman. You get that because there are hundreds of thousands of Black women that are like, look, we're tired of y'all using us in this party as mules. So, this is one step towards that shift in perspective and how you think about us. But we can do that same thing across the board with so many other things in our lives too, not just the representation part, because the point of representation is to get something done with it. It's not just to see a person. Granted, when you're younger, that's important, and not just younger, let me not say that, but it's important to see people. I don't want to discard that. But part of it is you don't get a momnibus, you don't get state bills, you don't get any of that without Black women being in those positions of power. So is that a part of it? Is that a part of the reclamation of the imagination? Because a lot of these folks don't have access to the theories and the research and stuff that I may or some of you may have access to. So I think it's just about connecting dots that we kind of already have and seeing how far we can go once we bridge those gaps between things. Because you don't get midwifery care in the last 5 years. Like that's so ancestral to who we are. You don't get the herbs and all the things for care in our communities just because we found out about it on social media. Like that is a long tradition of things. But I do think in the midst of that, we do have to think about the joy aspect too, because we got the survival part very down very well, but like, what would we also have needed to be happy when we were younger too if we weren't happy? Sorry, I live by the light rail, so sometimes the train, comes
Yeah,
down
you
the
hear
street.
it.
Oh, good. Shout out to noise cancellation. It
Yep,
worked. But
yep, because we did not hear it.
I'm like, Lord, they're gonna hear the ambulance because I'm by the hospital, the train, Lord. But um, I think it's just like in those quiet moments with ourselves, really deeply reflecting on what we needed and just figuring out the best ways, if possible, to make it happen. Grieve what we needed as well too, because even in the process of like the reflecting, sometimes it's things come up. Not everybody had like a great connection with their elders or communities like I do. So sometimes in that reflecting and like what people might have needed, it can get painful. So grieving that process as much as you need to, and also just celebrating the parts that are worth celebrating too. Again, having a family that still is learning and growing is a blessing. So even they're growing in how they talk about their reproductive needs and what they needed when they were younger. This is probably the first time that any job that I've had connects so closely to my family because they can, even though they don't know my title, they don't know where I work, they can't say Guttmacher, all that. They know that I'm doing work to address things that they wish that they would have had when they were younger. And that's important for me.
Mm, Thank you. Mhm,
No problem.
mhm.
Any other questions? Comments?
I wanted to ask you something about, I don't think I realized that you were in college when Obama came in. I was a mother, a working mother. I remember standing in line with my children. Um, I had a child in there somewhere. I was having kids all through the early 2000s. But I'm wondering if you could maybe, I don't really have a question. I just want to hear like where your head is at, like how you are after being so fired up. I mean, we were fired up with Obama, but to be a college student and have him come in to now. If you could just say a few words, and then I don't even know what I want. I'm just wondering, where are you in your mindset? Like with all of that history behind us.
Yeah, I hear a question in
Yeah,
there. And maybe I'm projecting a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and more so a question, but and then comments too. So excuse me, but like my proximity, my framework for the possibilities was
Uh-huh.
already grand as heck when I was a kid. When you're younger, you can do
Right.
everything. You can do this, you can do that. I was going to be the first Black woman mayor. Mary
Okay.
Sheffield just beat me to it, but I was going to do it. I was going to take Congressman Conyers' seat in Congress when he was ready to retire. Like I've always had that thought, that mindset of I can do whatever I want to do.
Right.
Having a president and not even just a president, but a campaign in the way that they ran a campaign and the way that they engaged with so many different spectrums of people, the energy that came out of that time
Yeah.
only reinforced the possibilities for me. And for
Got
a long time, it was real to an extent. Like I didn't have like a like sophisticated praxis for like maybe like some of the international things. Like I've been catching up on that stuff now about like engagement with other countries and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
there's still, he was not perfect in any way. No one is in that regard. But I
Yeah.
think overall, the way that he opened up the White House, like, yo, I was at the White House for briefings, and I'm just, this is normal to me. I'm like 20 years old, and I'm in there in the South Lawn, and I'm at the festivals, and I'm doing all this stuff. So my whole perspective on the possibilities of electoral politics is
Yeah.
completely, I can do whatever I want to do. Like
Mhm.
we're in there holding him accountable as Black feminists for his lack of like my sister's keeper when he has the my brother's keeper stuff. Not really appreciating that my brother's keeper never happened before. Like it's like, well, but yeah, you should care about the Black man. You a Black man. So it's kind of like my whole energy around how we hold people accountable and engage was just completely different. Child, we got that fool up in there, and I'm like, wait, hey, what's happening here? All of the things. And it was kind of like a whiplash effect, honestly. It was kind of like I go from going to the White House, you know, all the time to hear about like the work they're doing and the briefings and holding them accountable and protesting there. Because to be clear, I went to my share of protests too, protesting there, celebrating the second inauguration. Because again, I was in college when he got elected the second time. The first time I couldn't vote for him because I was still in high school. So yeah, we
Okay.
down there swag surfing, just a whole different thing.
Okay.
To now going to, I don't even want to go by this house. Like, I don't want to see this shit. I don't, excuse my French. I don't want to see this shit. I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was almost like a yanking of a reality that I'd known, to be honest. So I'm like, do I even want to engage with politics and policy? Is this even my lane? Like, was I kind of like, was it a little too easy to an extent beforehand because it was made to be somewhat easier because of who was in power and the people around him being in power and just the different model of engagement in general and what they brought to the White House? Now, to me, this is my first president, you know, like the person I voted for the first time as an adult. So I don't have any prior knowledge outside of like Bush and the potato stuff. Like, I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. So then to
Right.
go from that to this and then to come back to it again, it's
So,
completely shattering. If you don't have a strong foundation and you want to, and why you want to do your policy work, it was completely devastating. And it wasn't just about like not going to the festivals and all that kind of stuff, but it was like, um, it completely undid so much of like all that work that happened beforehand. Complete, and especially this administration now completely has shifted government in general in a way that has just not happened. Like, as much as some folks like, well, we've been here before, we've seen worse. First of all, no, I haven't. I have not seen worse. Leave me out of it. But more so than that, the government, as far as structure goes, has not seen anything like this before. So the progress that was made, and I'll bring it to Black maternal health, for example, all these like HRSA grants and all this, these staffers that worked on this stuff. We had the government, the Department of Health and Human Services had like even the faith liaison had like Black maternal health conferences and all this stuff because you had administration at the time, it was the Biden administration. You have a Kamala Harris that was the leader in the Senate for the mama business and all sorts of like maternal health and women's health things. Now in the White House, you're seeing a maternal health conference at the White House. So it's like they there's a possibility within government to transform how we think about all this. And there's
Right.
also that same end of the spectrum of possibilities to remove everything we've done and have ever known in regards to the advocacy as it relates to policy. That's why I really like to overemphasize as much as I can the state piece in all of this, because to be clear, federal and government, they work together. Funding comes from federal, all sorts of things come from federal, but there's still a lot that can happen on the state level. But I feel like to the point of where I started, I think the question in that is how do you manage the extremes of all of this? Like, how do you, because part of it too, and I see it in the generation right up under me. So I'm a younger millennial. They finally let the millennials be grown because they used that for youth synonymously for such a long time. But I'm on the younger end of that generation, so I'm close to, I think it's Gen Z right after. And I think that some folks had a similar perspective with Biden and Harris as well, overall, even though there was a lot of flack, deserved flack in a lot of ways. But like, it's kind of like you don't know how bad it can get until how bad it can get. So now
Yeah.
it's like, ooh, like,
Yeah.
you should have got her in there. But it's like, y'all, we kind of 2020, we dug so many holes in her campaign and she was trying to get her footing and wasn't doing the best, I don't think, in general too. But it's the extremes of it. And I think this is also new too. So I think part of it is you have to be very firm in your foundation and why you're doing the thing that you're doing, because it can't depend on the people that are in place to to keep your perspective on things. Because if that was the case, then we would be in trouble. We would be in serious trouble. But the work didn't start with such a glorious engagement with President Obama's, work, and it doesn't end with him either. Same thing
Right.
with Biden and Harris. We've never kind of like, that was never the thing for us because again, prior to, like, people didn't have the White House open like that. You didn't have a direct line to people's staff and such. So we never depended on that anyway. But it is very heartbreaking to see the progress that happened in those years, especially in regards to maternal health and reproductive issues go down the drain. But again, if it's happened before, it can happen again. And then
Yeah.
also that gives an opportunity to kind of lean more into the state and local element of it too.
Yeah, which I'm so glad to hear you highlighting that. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for hearing the question, but also the comments. I appreciate that.
No problem, because this is child.
I just can't imagine the yanking. But, you know, something you said that really stood out to me was the why. You know, the way I came to this work, was out of the community that I gave birth in. And I'm just coming back to that as I'm starting to go back to my manuscript. I'm realizing that's the biggest thing I want to highlight. And for a while there, I was like, I'm not even going to work, to be honest. I don't even like, this is not the time for me to even think about my manuscript because so much of language around Black communities is being knocked down. But then I got to a place where I was like, yeah, but what are we having to lean into? We're having to lean into the community, which is what my manuscript is about. So I hear you when you say, like, you know, what's the work that's driving you? What have you learned? What's the work that's most meaningful within your own households and your own experience of things? And how is that driving the work that you're doing? Also, I'm really happy to hear the trend of menopause. This is just as you're so happy to hear about the PCOS, baby. The menopause, perimenopause is a serious conversation. I'm grateful for that. But I wanted to, well, are there any other questions? Which I heard, okay.
Maybe I had a little question just of like what you guys are talking about of the sense of yanking, especially during this administration, because when Obama was elected the second time, I think maybe most of us were like in elementary school. Am I right about that? And when you, Miss Krystal, was speaking about the White House being so open, it like brought back a memory of my cousin actually had the opportunity to go to the White House. He was also in elementary school, go to the White House and with his class and meet Obama. And I'll never forget him coming home to all of us and just being like, I got to shake his hand, I got to shake his hand. So like going from that sense of having a president where you can not, like, you know, we were children, so we didn't really understand like some criticisms he was getting, but just having a president that you could at least admire for his charisma and just dedication to the people, to now being in college and having to, or at least I remember waking up that morning and just seeing the New York Times reporting the election. I was like, well, I don't want to go to class anymore.
Yeah.
So like, I guess what you already kind of doing, but what words of wisdom, encouragement would you give to the young people who now have to kind of experience our emerging adulthood with seeing like blatant corruption in the government, just seeing just like everything kind of fall apart in front of us a little bit? How would you encourage us to, as you were saying, get involved, stick to our foundations? Yeah, along that line.
Oh, Krystal, just think of the fact that you was in college when you had Obama and they in college and they living through.
On behalf of everybody that made that your reality, I apologize so much.
No.
Because
Not that you be the Black woman who put that on your shoulders. Absolutely not.
no. That's why I was about to make a joke and say on behalf of 92%, but I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Because I said I was gonna give us a year to keep making that analogy, and it's a little bit over now, but it's truth in it. But it is challenging. It has to be challenging. I can understand, you know, even with me, I think I was coming off of being in college when he was first elected. And yeah, I think honestly, the main lesson or the main takeaway for me and what I would hope people can get out of this is when everything is bare bones, the rebuilding is so much more possible in that way. Like I think for so many people have allowed themselves, and you know, for all different reasons, like survival, just experiences, to have a very thick veil on in regards to like who we are foundationally as a country, what we've done foundationally and have not done foundationally as a country. And if we can get to a point, even if it's, you know, only this million of a difference of votes, even electoral college, the reality is the fascism has been here. The all the things that are coming to a head have always been here. It has just been veiled and shielded in such a way that, if you're not lifting the veil on your own, or you don't have something to kind of like have that shake moment, then you'll believe it. So I think that, part of why people say that this is not, we've been through worse and things and such, is because we have had to generally have our veil lifted for a very long time. If you know anything about, I just watched, Lord, I don't know why I watched this on a flight back from Vegas. Judah, in the Black Messiah movie about the Black Panthers and infiltration and things like that. This stuff has been going on in such different ways for so long that if you know about it, it is a punch. I'm not going to say that I wasn't upset either. But it's the reality of things. So I think that when people, in these kind of moments, people can't help, they can, let me not lie. Because these MAGA folks, it's a cult. So it's kind of like they'll still be in denial about things. But the reality is, in moments like this, I think these are core times for organizing in the best ways that you can. It's core times for getting back to as many of the basics as we can. Like, I'm actually volunteering tomorrow with the Bloom Collective because they're doing mutual aid, because of what happened with the SNAP benefits and the pause and all the things that's happened, but especially that. I think it's a time to grieve as well. Again, grieve what could have happened. I know that that's what I'm doing. I know I mentioned I went to Howard. So when I was, I think a sophomore or junior, Kamala Harris came to campus, and I knew back then, oh yeah, she's running for president. Like I knew it was no doubt in my mind she's running for president. So I've been looking to, maybe not looking forward, but looking to this time for a long time, especially because one of the things that happened in the Obama years, is there was such a investment and influx of Black political engagement in general. So you get Black Voters Matter, you get Black Girls Vote, which is here in Baltimore that I'm involved with as well. You get all these different organizations and infrastructures that also have the backing of the money to be able to do work that they're doing. So like, well, if that happened with a Black man, imagine what happened with a Black woman. So I'm grieving in that way. I'm grieving in, again, the policies that could have been. I'm grieving in so many different ways while also holding the realities of what happened and how we got here too. So I think I might answer the question, but I would just say lean into the lifting of the veil in whatever that looks like for your life. Because we know how bad it can get, at least as far to this day, we know how bad it can get, but we have not seen how good it can get either. So I think it's a time to lean back into community and really lean into that imagination part, because we've dreamed up so much already and have done so much already. So I think once we can make sure people are just like able to survive, because that's also just where we are now too. Like people just don't have money to eat. But again, that's where the programs and things come from, so that we can continue to like do the outreach and do the dreaming part of it too. It's going to be challenging, but one thing about these kind of years, it's not going to get any better. So once we get, we have the mutual aid models from COVID and Black Lives Matter time and all that too. So again, I just think it's about connecting the dots as best we can. But allow yourself to be sad if you're sad. Like, I know that a lot of folks on my page are trying not to feel sad about certain things or trying to feel above. Well, they didn't care about us no way. You didn't got finessed. But it's like, bro, just stop. Okay. Like, just like, I mean, if that's what you need to do, fine. But I'm spending less and less time online so I can really just figure out how I feel about things because it's just so much sometimes. But anywho, hopefully that somewhat answered the question.
Oh, you did, you
But it's
did.
challenging. Again, I won't say it'll be easy.
But you know what? It calls us to be more consistent in the things that we do to care for each other despite it all, which is a part of it, because we used to care for each other and, we have models of the ways we cared for each other. And I think if we lean into that a little bit more and expand it, blow that up, and stay consistent in that, there could be some changes there. And that's not an easy answer, but I think that's a part of the answer. I wanted to ask you about the reverse mothering. You said that your grandmother was 75 years old. And that's beautiful, right? Because my grandmother is no longer here. I wish that my grandmother could see my son, and spend some time. I wish that I could be mothering my grandmother, but you also talked about your mother doesn't need the mothering yet. So go ahead and get her on, make sure you can track her to keep up with her now for when it's time comes. That's but the mothering of yourself, right? You have that as well. So I'm wondering if you could give us some of your joys of the types of mothering that you're engaged in, because I thought that was beautiful in the way that you described that. That's not something we've talked about in this course. So thank you for that.
Thank you. No, I was inspired by the course and the title and all that, and I'm like, ooh, let's get into it. And I said I wasn't true. I have to reel my mother in a little bit too, but it's just different. Um, So I don't know. I just think I've been struggling for most of my life actually in the overextension. I've always been a nurturer, I've always been caring. I'm always been, proud to be a provider in some ways, and really help out in the ways that I can with my family and my community, especially like my close community. Um, but I found myself being very drained and exhausted, more so than ever, and especially when the PCOS symptoms really started to beef up, and I'm like, okay, I'm sleeping, but I'm still tired, or I'm having extended PMS, and that typically bothers my attitude and my appetite, and I'm starving, but I'm nauseous at the same time. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, but at the same time, I kind of do know what to do. Like, if I've done it for my grandmother in some ways, I've done it for my mother in some kind of ways, I've done it for immediate community, friends that, my friend, one of my best friends has a 9-year-old, so doing what I can to support her. And not to mention the activism. Like, I'm gonna organize my brain out. Like, I'm just gonna do it. My job, I'm excelling in all my jobs. I'm like, what? Can you apply that same kind of rigor and that same kind of like energy and that same understanding and grace and all the things to yourself as well? And the answer is yes. But to your point about consistency, that's where I struggle. So I've done this uh before, where I literally will drop as much as I can to focus on myself, maybe the workout, maybe the eating, maybe saving, maybe like preparing things, like just all these little tangible things that I can do to just show myself that I care for myself. And I might take a trip out of town, and it's like, it disrupts, or I may have to do this project and I'm like, oh, whatever, whatever. So I sometimes have to work in the extreme of, girl, just stop, like stop it, wrap it up. And most people are very understanding because I'm so just consistent and so always ready to support. And people kind of say in passing, like, you have to fill your own cup up first. But I'm like, but do you really mean that? And in most cases, the people that I've curated at this point in my life anyway do mean it. So I know that there have been so many times where I'm like, Mom, I can't do blah blah blah. And she's like, oh, that's okay, I'll do it. And I'm like, oh, so the world didn't end because I told her I couldn't do something and she's gonna pick up and do it herself.
Mhm.
Um, so it's kind of one of those tricky things, because also the mothering has shifted. Whereas this between us, because I don't want to tell my grandma business, but I sent her some money. I sent her a nice amount of money. And it was like gone in like 2 days, and she needed more money. And I'm like, and she didn't ask for more money. She didn't ask me for the money. I just sent it because I knew she needed it, but it was gone because she was trying to pay back bills and other things and such like that, because she's always had great credit. She's always been responsible, and she's struggling now because her job closed. She was still working. Her job closed, suddenly. And I'm like, okay, so I sent her the most money I've ever made from a speaking engagement, which I was very proud of, and I was proud to give it to her, and it's gone. So I've had to shift my whole like perspective on how I can even support and help in a way that's still helpful and still needed. So now I just started this recently. Maybe I don't send her the money directly for groceries. Maybe I send the groceries. Maybe I send the stuff from the store. Maybe I send a gift card to a specific place. Same thing with my younger brother, which is my real child. Krystal, can you send me money because I got to get to work? You know your butt had to get to work, but whatever. Now it's an Uber gift card instead of the money. It just has to be a way that just feels good for me. But
Yeah.
also, I've met my own savings goal this year, even in helping my family. So that makes me feel good.
Yes.
I bought a necklace the other day, and child, it was more than I wanted to spend, but I bought a necklace. Like, I am trying to get more sleep. Like, even I'm in the middle of planning for this ball that's on Friday.
Yeah.
I'm not texting them back. And like, I need to sleep. So everybody's on I'm on Do Not Disturb right now, that I just discovered because I was preparing my remarks. And I'm like, oh, this is great. So like, it's the smaller things, but it's the larger things too, where it's like, how do I make sure that I'm not projecting violence on myself too? Because part of this is all this whole experiment, it infiltrates you in a way of like, you're not worthy of supporting yourself, or you're not worthy of helping yourself, or you're not like your worth is in how much you can exhaust yourself, or how much you can help, how much you can do at work, whatever the case may be. And my metrics for success had to change. Like me not having back pain when I wake up is a huge win, because I know that I did things that I need to do the days before to not be in back pain. Whether it's what I ate as far as inflammation goes, the positions that I'm sitting in, am I actually getting up and moving throughout the day so that I'm not in pain? Like there's just so many small things throughout the day, and bigger things too, of course, but that's just what I'm trying to do. But also in a way that I can still be of service to my communities, because again, I've been doing service more than half my life at this point. So I have to do something, but maybe it can be a one-off thing once a month versus something that I'm doing every day. Maybe it can shift in that way. Maybe I can implement things more in my job so I get that satisfaction too. Um, and also my satisfaction can't be based off external validation all the time either. So that's a whole thing that I'm having to work through in therapy. It's great. But yeah, so it's a journey, it's a journey. But when your metrics for who you are so in the stereotypical older sibling thing, it's just challenging. Because that's
Yeah.
how, like I've been, me and my brother are a year and well, almost 2 years apart. And even when I was younger, my mom, the way that she had us not be in that kind of competition thing with siblings, and she was like, "Oh, this is your baby too."
Oh,
But like thinking more about that, I'm like, wait, this why I thought that this food was my responsibility my whole life in that way. Like, and she has to work through her part in it too, with the son and the boy thing. So it's a
yeah.
lot, but I think it's worth it, worth it work for sure.
I think it is. Thank you for that. Thank you for breaking that all. I identify with you in so many ways, to the point where I parked a little bit further from campus today so I can get that walk in. And it was funny because then I was like, oh, maybe I can find a spot closer. I thought you wanted to walk. I had to have that conversation with myself. Did you want to walk or did you not want to walk? Because why do I need to, like, I need to walk for my health. So it's just like the really, really small ways of taking care of yourself. For me, that definitely brings me joy, because I'm definitely in a mind space of thinking about longevity now, because so many women in my family don't make it to 75, 80. Like they don't live long at all. And with me sitting clearly at 47, looking really, I'll be 48 in January. I'm like, okay, so what you need to do different? So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Any final questions or anything? All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And I know we went over a little bit, so I appreciate it.
Oh, no, we didn't. This class ends at 1:15. We are good. We are
Okay.
perfect. Yeah.
And if anybody has other questions or thoughts or anything like that, I'm available. I can put my email in the chat. I think you have my email too, Dr. Wright.
I do.
If
I
anything
can-
comes up, in regards to especially policy related things. But yeah, it was so great to
Thank
see you
you.
all. Thank y'all for the questions. Y'all have a good rest of the day, and hopefully the semester wraps up beautifully.
Thank you. Bye-bye.